over the recommended forestry project costs, but still slightly below the overall cost that we would get for all projects. So again, using the Mentimeter, first off, another new question is, would you approve the budget increase if you're a BWPP member? Because it's going to cost more. All right, so we're getting pretty universal answers on that one, that folks are okay with the budget increase. Might be biased in part because a whole bunch of the folks on this presentation were our BWPP members who did approve that cost increase. And same question we had before about what information would you use to decide which one to go with? Which of the three now bids? Ask bid number one to get workers' comp, go with the landowner. Quality bid one, confirm workers' comp is not needed. Workers' comp is needed. The option would have been for us as the QISP to cover the contractor under our workers' comp, which would incur additional costs to the QISP, which we did not, which had not been at this point explored. So let's accommodate that. Solid reputation and insurance for not much more money. Tend toward familiar contractor with lack of ins. Comp, then hire them. All right. Try to negotiate costs is another one. So, and then the question is, which one would you actually hire? 1, 2, or 3? More love for bid 3 than I'd anticipated. So we're getting a pretty even split, which suggests that any one of the choices we made could have been justified, because we're not clear in any way here which way to go. It's pretty evenly split. I'll say what we did do is the WIC did approve the budget increase to $95,000. And that's more than what the bids were, but it allowed for additional contingencies to come later on. The QISP ended up hiring the landowner. Helps us maintain relations for future O&M access, and we wanted to avoid the issues with the insurance. Dan, you have a question?
Just curious on the insurance thing. Did the RFP require proof of insurance at the time of submission, or just that they would need to get the insurance prior to starting work?
So recall, this is a simplified bid rather than an RFP. So we just said, how much is it going to cost to do this work? And then we asked, do you have the insurance?
And what was in the solicitation for bid, did you spell out how bids would be ranked? Because just in construction, lowest responsive bid is usually the byword for things.
Offhand, I'm not remembering exactly how we responded that, but we said that by not having workman's comp insurance, it wasn't a sufficiently responsive bid. And it was interesting how the bids came in. That first highest bid was the first one we got. There was, because remember, it was way over budget. We didn't really want to go for that higher budget. So it took us a little time to get these additional bids. The third one that came in was the last one, and it was just in order to allow us to have three bids to compare. We really had to beat the bushes to get that third bid.
Right. Well, you're not required to receive three bids. You're just required to listen to three bids.
Yeah, but we had some concerns
Yeah, no,
about
it's the more
on,
you get, the more you get, the better. Yeah.
and we had concerns about cost on bid 3 and experience on bid 2. So we really did want to get another one just to see, even see where we were in the ballpark. Because the other piece is all of these were over our budget. If we kept looking, we thought maybe we could find one within our budget, which we did not.
Right. And did you send a bid summary to all three bidders, and did the lowest bidder object or anything? Or
No, with no objections. We did it. Most of the communication came through the consulting forester on those other pieces, so I don't know that I could even document that.
okay.
So we ended up going with the landowner, bid number 2. One of the odd pieces of the landowner's request is they wanted all the payment up front, which we did not agree to. We gave a upfront payment for him to buy the materials that were going to be needed of half, and then we were going to pay half afterwards. They received their mobilization payment. Work began July 10th with a targeted completion date by the end of the month. There was a site visit by the consulting forester on July 11th, and he was not happy with the quality of the work. The culverts hadn't been installed properly. The consulting forester provided instructions to the contractor on proper placement. The culverts were removed and replaced adequately, but the consulting forester had the sense that the contractor was not as skilled as we had been led to believe, and he had concerns about their ability to complete the project correctly. So how do you proceed in that situation? We had 3 options that I thought of was, well, 2 options: seek corrective action, cancel the contract, bring in someone new, or something else. Mostly I put in the something else to get a sense of other folks about like, what else could we have done? So not clear unanimity, but we're getting a sense that most people would have sought corrective action. And we did that. We sought corrective action. We gave them another chance. We gave more guidance as to what we were looking for. The contractor reported that the work was done, and the inspection went out on August 18th, now 18 days after the purported end of the work term, and it was sloppy. We really weren't happy with the work. We developed a punch list for the contractor that would at least allow us to call the project complete. And on 8/25, the forester returned, and after being told the punch list had been completed, but it still wasn't done, there were still gaps in what we expected. We authorized the forester at that point, after having sought corrective action, that the work was inadequate. We would need to hire someone else to finish it, and the cost of the additional work would need to be deducted from the agreed amount from the contractor. This is the point where I was like, I don't know if we're going to get this project done. And this is where I started to put this whole presentation together, thinking, oh my God, there's these things that can go wrong that I had never even really thought of before. So in the second round of construction, we solicited 3 bids for a second contractor. We received 1 bid. The other entities just weren't interested. The second contractor was hired on September 23rd at a cost of $4,000, because remember, now we're just finishing up that punch list. This isn't the whole project. Some work had been done. On the final site inspection took place on October 8th, and at that point, all segments met AMP standards, and we were able to close out the project. So the difference between what we had imagined originally versus what we got, we had a predicted anticipated phosphorus reduction of 23 kilograms. We ended up a little bit less than that at 22 kilograms. The difference probably being the length of the roadway that was met and measurements pre versus post construction. Our budget went from $40,000 originally to $88,000 by the time we got everything done. So our predicted cost per kilogram of phosphorus went from $1,700 to $4,000 per kilogram. So it was still a decent project, but there were a lot of headaches involved with it. Dan?
And the P reduction, what is that a function of in this particular project type?
We would be using the phosphorus calculator for forest roads, and the phosphorus calculator is based on linear length of forest roads. The difference between the two, the projected versus the initial versus actual, would be the length of the roads. Like if we measured them at different lengths at two different areas. One thing we found was with the Forest Parks and Rec tools, it was kind of hard to go back and reassess the same segments. The segments, they're not like MRGP segments where they're pretty well defined. Each time you go out and do them, the person measuring them might come up with slightly different answers. So I see that as a fairly small difference there, probably related to measurement of length of the segments.
And how many total meters was the segments?
Each segment should be 100 meters each. There were like 7 segments, I think, 9 segments. And the initial assessment was done by Forest Parks and Rec, and the subsequent assessment was done by our consulting forester, and they had different labeling procedures. They named the segments differently between the pre and post construction.
And the P reduction is so high because it's essentially a dirt road, not that's what the forest, because I'm just sort of like a typical MRG thing. The best you can do is like, I think it's 0.38 kilograms on a gravel road. You go from non-compliant to fully compliant, you get 0.38 kilograms for every 100 meters. On the forest road calculator, you must get what, if you get 4 kilograms per 100 meters.
Yeah, the forest road calculator was very nice to the Quisps.
Need to find some forest roads.
Yeah. Ben?
Yeah, so on that point, we are going to have some new forest road calculations that are coming out that are going to reduce that quite a bit. So before you go beating the bushes too much, Dan, you'll have some new numbers.
That's okay. We paved every road in Chittenden County.
And then the other point I just wanted to make is the process for reevaluating roads has been changed. So when we started this whole thing, we had people essentially go out and remap everything. And now we have a new business process where instead of going out and remapping everything, you're just kind of reassessing things. So you're not going to, I think, have that same issue of kind of the changing lengths of those road segments. So again, still kind of new process and need to work through this new framework, but just wanted to flag that it is different now in terms of how we do that reassessment.
Yeah, and that difference between the phosphorus or the reductions predicted and post, and the difference between the assessments gave me a lot less heartburn than the whole process of hiring a contractor and figuring out when work wasn't going as well, and this interaction between Forest Parks and Rec and the Quisp, but then not managing the project. That another side piece of this is that the proposed timber sale, to the best of my knowledge, never actually went through. Forest Parks and Rec didn't get any bidders for the proposed timber sale because of constraints due to bat habitat and the need for winter harvesting and very steep, not very good roads that nobody wanted to do winter harvesting in this area. Dean?
Yeah, I just want to make sure I'm following. So the initial contractor hired is the landowner who happened to be a contractor. Am I getting that right?
Mostly right. The initial contractor hired was the landowner who had some experience driving machines and had a buddy down in New Jersey that was going to help him out. The buddy down in New Jersey was articulate enough to convince our consulting forester that it would be okay, but was not a contractor and probably shouldn't have been hired in the first place. But
it was the landowner.
But it was the landowner, and he did have workman's comp insurance. So he had enough of a structure for us to believe that he was able to do the work.
Okay.
Oh, you muted yourself.
Oh, am I back?
Yep.
Okay. I guess the follow-up is, does any of this concern you about the O&M phase? You know, the way that the things went with the landowner, it doesn't sound like it was rosy. So, like, where is that going to leave you?
Yeah.
Do they hold a grudge?
Oh,
And are they going to extract themselves out of the project? You know, you have those, you had that credit for now, but
There was a lot of concern about that, which is why we kept giving him a longer and longer leash in terms of, here's your punch list, do it. Okay, here's your punch list, do it again. You didn't do it right here, do it again. Eventually we decided we couldn't do the project otherwise. And yes, we met with the landowner. We explained what was missing. I was really nervous about how that meeting, and it went great. He was very open to the critiques. He was very open to the feedbacks. I don't anticipate problems with O&M, but it was absolutely something that scared me going as this project was progressing. And really, that was it. I just wanted to walk through all these potential places where the project could go off. The only reason this ended up working is you know, what Ben mentioned, they're going to revise the phosphorus reduction numbers, but they looked really good for us. So we had them going forward. And the projects, there was a time when I started putting this together, as I mentioned, was before we had that last meeting with the landowner about going to a new contractor, and I was really nervous about how things were going to go at that point. But since then, things went fairly smoothly. We've closed out the project and are reasonably happy with the results. Happy for any thoughts, questions, anything else. Trying to see Rick's comment, but it was too quick for me.
I'm going to jump in with a general observation. I really like the walkthrough that you, or the story that you told, Mike, of taking us through the different steps. Because I could live the process a little bit through your eyes, which I don't, I mean, I see it from a slightly different perspective usually. And I think the risk that's presented, especially with the phosphorus numbers, is it just sticks out to me in this walkthrough. And while this particular project type is seen, you know, I think even with the cost increases, the project type in general, even though those numbers are going to change, but based on what the methodology was at the time of this project, I think the numbers are pretty solid, right? Like even though you have some cost overruns, you're feeling comfortable with it. But I can anticipate if I was a QUISP, I would be really nervous all the time about cost overruns. Like it just hits me more the way this was presented. I don't know why. So I don't know. I'll just throw that out there for whatever it's worth. But I can imagine a project that's just a little bit more expensive or higher phosphorus to cost, you know, the ratio being a little bit higher there, being a little bit riskier. I can see it. I can see being nervous and, you know, like, wow, you know, if all of our projects are having cost overruns, typically of 10, 20% or whatever it is, or half the projects are having cost overruns, if a project that's right on the edge, you're going to be nervous about approving it. Yeah, so I don't know.
The cost overruns really surprised me. I had not really experienced it before. Questions in the chat is what factors cause the actual cost to more than double the original estimate? And quite frankly, it's because the original budget was off. Like, I didn't have the experience to evaluate that. The budget was developed by Forest Parks and Rec, so I thought that it would be accurate, but speaking with the consulting forester, he's like, no, this budget was never realistic. But we don't know that as the QUISP.
I see Brian's hand, but allow me to put a sentence from my perspective here at DEC. I'll just say, I appreciate all the quests willing to take the risks that you're taking. And it's just the environment that we're working in. And as long as you're taking reasonable risk, like it's the world we live in order to get these projects done. So I'm just appreciative of that dynamic, that you're all here doing this work. Yeah, thanks. I'll pass it to Brian.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So a couple things here. One, for a project like this with the cost efficiency ratio that Mike, initially predicted, and even where you ended up, to me, those projects don't cause me as much anxiety in terms of the overall risk, given the amount of money for the credits being achieved. It's when a project comes in and it's really close to your cost efficiency threshold and it gets approved and there's still some questions. That's what I really start to worry about, the cost overrun, not when it's we got this project and it's $1,700 a kilogram right now, and even if it goes up to $10,000 a kilogram, it's still cost efficient. So we have plenty of wiggle room. To your point, Mike, about the hiring of the landowner, and I didn't jump in quickly enough as you were moving through your slides. We had a project where the landowner was potentially interested in bidding, and it was not a project that we were running. It was a project that one of our partners was running, and I said, that's fine, but here's this list of requirements, insurance, et cetera, that they need to meet. And unfortunately, they didn't bid on the project. That concerned me more about your project than anything else. And, I might have approached it slightly differently to say, like, and I understand it was based on the relationship building process and, sort of the longer term vision. But to me, it's sort of like, we're investing $90,000 in your property. That should engender enough goodwill for you to allow us to come onto your property for another 10 years and make sure that the project is functioning as needed. And if you can't get to yes from there, if I couldn't get to yes from there, I potentially would want to walk away from that project.
And that's fair. It may well be one of the lessons that I take away from this, but I had not had that yet. Yep. So, and because it's not just the relationships that I was trying to maintain with the landowner as part of the QUISP and the O&M, but also Forest Parks and Rec needed the cooperation of the landowner to conduct the timber sale that they were planning.
Sure. Yeah. And, I was actually, my concern with that was less about whether or not the person was a capable contractor, which sounds like you ran into that difficulty, and more like, for a job like this, where there's not a specific engineering design that needs to be followed and some potential leeway, is the landowner just going to do what they want to do, and make sure that they get that full 80,000 or whatever the bid was? That to me, it seems like a little bit more concerning.
Yeah, and that was a nice rule. Nice having the consulting forester was the one that could say, what are you going to do? I'll tell you another takeaway I have from this is I've done a lot of post-construction site assessments for road foremen doing grants and aid work on similar projects, but public roads. And I have a lot more appreciation of the skills they bring to their work to do it right after seeing what is done when you don't have the equipment, you don't have the skills. Chris and then Dean.
You have a comment and a question in the chat, and I can read it for you. Or you can read it if you can see it.
This is the actual cost to more than double.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was, I responded to that saying that the original budget that we received was just not realistic. And as the QUISP, we didn't have the ability to know that, but once the consulting forester came on and he saw the budget, and he was just like, there's no way we're going to get somebody to do this amount of work for this money. So I don't know how to manage that. We have to trust the project proposers to come up with budgets that are realistic. And that's kind of another place where we got caught by management when we took over management of it, is now we were on the hook for it. Whereas if we had hired, if our typical projects, if we had hired somebody to do this work and they didn't present a budget and the work needed to be done, then we could hold them to their original budget. But we couldn't hold Forest Parks and Rec to the budget because we were managing the project. Dean?
Yeah, so your project gets me thinking about the scope of the right of way that Forest Parks and Recreation relies on to get to the land that they own. Did you explore that? And if so, did you explore it extensively or kind of lightly or maybe not at all? Because the reason I'm asking is that who we think of as the landowner in a situation like this comes to my mind. It's if the terms of the right of way that Forest Parks and Recreation rely on to get to their land essentially gives them whatever control you need, then why aren't we just focusing on the approval of the Forest Parks and Recreation and the right of way that they're relying on rather than the surrounding landowner?
So this isn't so much a right of way as a temporary allowance for Forest Parks and Rec to use the private road to access public land. So we didn't explore that. We allowed, this is Forest Parks and Rec said, this is what we need, and we followed their lead on it. So that's and then was there a second part to that?
Well, so wait, to make sure I'm understanding. So there was no right of way.
No.
There's nothing. So this a landlocked parcel?
To get
Which
to
can
this
legally claim some right of way, or
no, to get to the particular area of the state forest where they wanted to do the harvest. That doesn't mean the entire state forest doesn't have access, but this particular piece was accessed by a private land.
okay, so it was more convenient, more cost effective, and et cetera, to
Yeah,
go there rather than all the way around the horn, so to speak, to get to that particular place. Because let's say that landowner had not been willing to allow that access across, that project would have been not viable, or if it had been viable, it would have been less so. So, okay.
Yeah.
This is just changing my thinking about the situation because
Yeah,
it just seems even more challenging and speculative.
The timber sale would not have occurred, could not have occurred without the access via the public land. Or private land, sorry.
Okay, but not lasting access. It was fleeting, ephemeral.
It was for the harvest, correct?
Yeah. Okay.
Hey, Mike,
Yes.
it's Dave Wilcox here.
Oh, Dave, welcome. Thanks for weighing in. Dave.
So yeah, I'm the FPR that Mike keeps referring to, and this was a timber sale that access to a lot that historically happened this way, not as state land, but this was brought to my attention by the stewardship forester in Rutland as an access they were going to use to state land, and he had concerns about how the road was constructed and how it met the AMPs. And he asked me if there were, what I would recommend for working on this access road through private land. I didn't know anything about it. So when I looked at it, I thought, well, this would be a great project for the QUISP to look at because it would be a good first project. It wasn't only for state access to timber. This is a woodlot that this guy has that it's a forest road. So it doesn't really, and the fact that the state hasn't cut wood there really doesn't have anything to do with this project. This would have been a good project, in my opinion, whether the state was going to do access or not, because it's a forest road to this fella's woodlot. So there's no right of way, there's no legal access. The state has dozens of handshake agreements with landowners, just like the state allows people to access their woodlot through state land without a legal right of way. We write a special use permit. So this sort of thing happens all the time. But this was brought to the QUISP's attention as a potential, forest road project because there aren't that many of them. And we helped with the REI. We tried to help with the budget. I think it was the amount of gravel that was used and the cost of trucking the gravel that blew the budget out of the water. I think some of the yardages, what we put the bid together for wasn't exactly what I think was brought in for material. But also, I was shocked at the cost of delivering a load of gravel to that site. Just very different than what we see in central Vermont or our part of central Vermont. So anyways, I just wanted, if that helps or not, my goal in introducing this project to the QUISP was as a forest road project that I hadn't seen many of, and wanted to see how it would go. And so this is a great deep dive into forest road projects and clean water service providers.
Thanks, Dave. And Dave's triggering my memory. It was really the cost of getting gravel to the site that really exploded the budget. That was much higher than had been anticipated. Any other thoughts or questions? Well, thank you all for your time. And
Yeah, this has been great, Mike. Thanks for putting this together again. And I wouldn't mind doing this again with another QUISP. Like, I think this is really great to get together and talk about projects and just take the time to do a little bit of a deeper dive. So thanks for doing this, and maybe we can get someone else on the hook for a month or 2 or 3 down the road. Thanks everyone for attending.
thanks all.
Have a good one.